Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want you to showcase the Magicka Warden as a damage dealer a little bit. We are on the PTS Morrowind test server, so a lot of things will probably change till it goes live. I just want to show you my setup. I will kind of show you different setups when we do DPS tests, just to see how the numbers are affected by it. And we will also analyze the combat metrics parse to see where most of the damage comes from and why we get that certain amount of damage. And the resource management and all the kind of things that you can do to make the Warden, like that you don't need to do heavy attacks, for example, and all kind of things. So I want to go through the process with you. Kinda what I try to do. I tried like for 2-3 hours on the target skeleton. And I had like 2-3 different setups. And I kind of want to showcase this to you, why I changed certain things, etc. Now, in the end, obviously, this should be a trial build, but we will get into that later. Now, when you look at our stats, when I buff myself, we have 54k Magicka, the usual health amount, 57% spell crit, and 2455 spell damage with the Thief Mundus Stone. Really nice stats. Now, we are using Necropotence. We can use this because the blue Betty here, you only need to slot it on one bar. It works like the shades. And weapon swap it, and it's still here. And it keeps proccing Necropotence, which is really nice. So you actually can activate that outside of combat, which is cool. Then I have 3 Moondancer jewelry with spell damage and chance. Again, we will later change the gear setup a little bit. Now I basically just have the standard setup, like a medium and a heavy Groftar piece. We will change it later to 2 light pieces. I just kind of want you to showcase the sustain that we get with a standard setup compared to like in Homestead. And we have 2 Maelstrom staves. Now, obviously, you could use the Moondancer stuff here if you don't use poison, but you kinda need them. And my friend, actually, he doesn't run Groftar. He only runs 1 piece bonus that gives you max Magicka, and then he runs a second Moondancer piece here. With those 3 and the Moondancer stuff. So he has 5 pieces Moondancer and can proc the Moondancer buff that gives you Magicka recovery or spell damage. Because Magicka recovery is kinda important. Now I just have them here because on the PTS we actually can get them, so it's pretty nice. And I use a Drain Magicka Poison, so those will become very popular next patch, because you see, it restores 238 Magicka per second. Now this is really nice, and it's basically a must-have for all setups on one of the bars. So yes, the Crusher, like the enchantment here, Crushing Wall, is only active on this one, but as we have the Blockade of Fire on this bar, it doesn't really matter. And we still gain the 189 spell damage, although you don't see it. Like, it's still here. That's kinda the basic setup. In terms of champion points, we'll also play around a little bit later. For now, 50 Elemental Expert, 40 Elfborn, 40 Spell Erosion. You see, with only 40 points, I get 3400 spell penetration. That's insane. Then I have 35 Master at Arms and 45 in Thaumaturge. Now, some abilities, like, I think this here doesn't work correct yet. It scales with Master at Arms instead of Thaumaturge, so that will probably be fixed till it goes live. Now, in terms of skills, so let's just try the most obvious setup first. Obviously, I need Elemental Drain. Then we have the Deep Fissure here. We activate this, it deals a ton of damage after 3 seconds. Then we have the Cliff Racer. The further we are away, the more damage it does, but we use Groftar, so we don't get the 15%. Bird of Prey gives us a minor Berserk, 8% more damage. Inner Light, Sleet Storm, the North Storm here, because it gives us 8% more max Magicka. This is 8%, this is 7%, and with Necropotence, like you have seen, we have so much Magicka. Really cool. Blockade of Fire, Winter's Revenge, another dot. and the Fetcher infection. So basically you can see every time I go to my back bar, I apply this dot, and the Fetcher flies. So it's kind of my dot bar here. And every second rotation I try to reapply the Blue Betty. And the Destro ultimate. Now you're like, why don't you use the bear? So yes, the bear does more damage in single target. However, in a raid, you will not be able to use the bear in most situations, unless you don't want to complete the trial. The thing is, in most boss fights you have cleave damage, like there's additional mobs. And the bear has a little bit AoE damage, but not that much. It's just Death Ult is just way stronger in terms of AoE damage, and that's what you need. I will also showcase the bear later to you, because on the target skeleton you will get slightly more damage with the bear than with the Death ulti. But first off, I just want to kind of show you what damage we get. Obviously I will do like mistakes, but we will still kind of see the average DPS we get, so it should give you kind of a good estimate. Just to show you, like, ping is also bad, so we lose a little bit more DPS. So where are other classes at? Basically, I mean, I did a few tests. I will probably also upload those parses later. For example, Magicka Dragon Knight self-buffed 32k DPS. Then we have Magicka Templar, also around 32k DPS. Magicka Nightblade 29k DPS. And then we have the Magicka Zork, 40k DPS, yes, balanced. And then we have kind of the Magicka Warden, and where does his sit? So basically, Magicka Warden is pretty weak, because you will see in a second, we will get between 20 to 25k DPS. That's it. Okay, it's really not that good yet. However, again, I think Zenimax will buff certain dots, because it's just kind of weird. It's just not that good yet. But anyway, that doesn't stop us from testing, obviously. So let's just do the rotation, so you actually can kind of see what DPS I get. And like I said, I will change some gear around. So, because in the end, I want the build that doesn't require heavy attacks. Maybe once every like 2-3 rotation a heavy attack I'm fine with. But I really don't like heavy attack builds on Magicka setups, because they're very slow. So our goal is to kinda have a build that doesn't require a lot of heavy attacking. Now let's start this. So as you can see, with this certain setup, we have to do a few heavy attacks. Like, we don't struggle that much. Main reason is because we use those poison. So let's just see the DPS kinda. 24, let's say 25k. And maybe, yeah, okay, so 25k, again, other classes, Magicka DK, Magicka Templar, 32k self-buffed, Magicka Sorc, 40k, or even more. And then we have Magicka Nightblade around 28, 29k. So the Warden kinda lacks damage in terms of DP, like, it just lacks damage. Why is that? First off, let's just look at the Drain Magicka, that's the poison, was up like 35% of the fight. So we have our base regulation, all that other stuff. So we kind of get a nice Magicka return. But keep in mind, like, this is only a stationary fight. So in a trial, we would lose probably a little bit more damage, like Magicka. So sustain would even be more difficult. Now you can see our strongest abilities are damage over time effects. Again, this here doesn't count as a dot yet, so it would slightly do more damage. Winter's Revenge, Blockade of Fire, Fetcher Infection, then Deep Fissure, Screaming Cliff Racer. And you have seen, in the Parse itself, I had to start doing heavy attacks instead of Cliff Racers. Obviously, the rotation wasn't 100% perfect. Fury Rage, Light Attacks, Grofdar, and all that kind of thing. Now, this type of build here, is it viable for a trial? Yes. But we need to do a fair amount of heavy attacks to be able to sustain, which I kinda dislike. That's why I kinda want to change around the build. But again, before I go to the next one, 25k DPS, and it's just too weak, okay? I do hope that all classes can sustain between 30 and 35k DPS on a like target skeleton, and by sustained I mean at the end of the parse you still have 50% or more of your resources. If you're at 0, the build will not be good in a trial, so you should have around 50%. If you manage to get 50%, then it's good. Same about the health. Like, if you have less than 17.2k health, you're going to have a problem. So that's what you should aim for. Maybe even 18k if possible, especially in the new trial. But I mean, we have a lot of Magicka. Now, like you've seen, our max Magicka, it's so high, and our abilities hit like wet noodles, literally. Obviously, I didn't have it up all the time, and I had a lot of unlucky crits here. My spell crit rating is at 57%, and I only get 39% crit. Like, why does this happen? Doesn't make sense, especially for a dot. It had the most hits, so how can it not get the correct crit rating, or at least close to it? I actually have seen that quite often on this ability, that it's a lot lower than it should be. Maybe it's a bug, I don't know. That's the thing. And you see, like, overall, the dots just hit like not hard compared to other classes. For example, when we look at the Magicka Sorc, which is completely overpowered compared to any other setup. So, like I said, they do like 40k or even more on a target skeleton. Those three, like, the pets alone of the Magicka Sorc, like 1 or 2 pets, do probably as much damage as 3 of those skills. Like this, this, and this together. So it just doesn't make any sense. Well, I don't want to turn this into a nerf Magicka Sorc thread or video, but whatever. You just see, like, Winter's Revenge, it's ice-based, like frost, so it doesn't scale with like fire damage. Fire damage is always stronger, okay, no matter what you do. Especially in a raid situation where you have a Magicka Dragonite applying Engulfing Flames. So we would do 10% more damage on this ability. But the Winter's Revenge dot kinda strong because it scales off max Magicka. It doesn't say it here anymore. I don't know why those tooltips are always so bad, but before you morph it, it says it scales off max Magicka, and that's what it does. And because we have Necropotence, we get a lot. So, like you've seen me, I apply Winter's Revenge dot. It is 12 seconds, so I just reapply it every time I swap to the back bar. I reapply Blockade of Fire. Then I reapply Fetcher Infection. Now with Fetcher Infection, there is, you see, every other cast deals 75% increased damage. So, one rotation, you get 75% more damage. The next rotation, you don't. You get again, you don't. So it swaps back and forth. So one, you have a bad infection with bad DPS, and the next one you have good infection with good DPS. And obviously the blue Betty. Now this ability here, like it's instant. It says instant cast time, but it takes like 1.5 seconds to cast. It's completely, like, it's not good. But because we all know weapon swap, animation cancel, you can activate it and it pops up. I really don't know why it has such a long animation that locks you into the animation, although it says instant cast. But that's basically the reason why we have it on the back bar. Then what I try to do is I use Deep Fissure. Once I do Bird of Prey, and then I do 2 Cliff Racers. I do another Deep Fissure and a weapon swap, or I reapply Elemental Drain. Now Bird of Prey in a raid, you don't really need it because you kinda get the same buff from Combat Prayer, so you could slot something else here. But just overall damage, it's a joke on a Magicka Warden. Stamina Warden is another thing, I will do a separate video on that, but here. Now, let's change a few things around. Like, how can we get better sustain? So basically, we can use 2 light pieces here. So we have 7 light armor, which will make our resistance pretty low, but it will give us a little bit more sustain. So when we look at this here, 2,787 cost. Pretty expensive. And when I actually do the old ones, we are at 2,900. So we don't really gain a lot with this, but it still helps. So we will use this. And we will also use a cost deduction glyph. Where is it? There we go. Now again, technically, like, we lose some Magicka because we don't have a 5-1-1 setup anymore. But now let's see how the sustain is. Let me get ulti. Because we can either use cost reduction glyph on jewelry or like 7 light. We also could use this drink here, but then the health drops. 16.2k is not enough for a trial, like not even close. Let me just respec a little bit so we keep the same amount of health. Because in the end it's a trial build and we should kinda work towards that. There we go. Don't need a lot of points, but it will be worth it. Most times you have Ebon armor or something, then you're good to go. Now, let's do another parse and see what kind of DPS we get. You see, sustain is already a little bit better, but it's still not where it should be. So I kind of have to start heavy attacking. And you see, like, my blockade of fire always kind of drops off, which is not good. Means the rotation is a little bit too long. But now here, like, we still have to do heavy attacks, but not as much as previously. With only some minor changes. You see, because of those changes, we already lose DPS, obviously. Like, we have less max Magicka, we have less max spell damage. But because I already have to do less heavy attacks, the rotation is a little bit faster paced, so you can use abilities more, and that's why we don't really lose a lot of DPS. Now you can see again, like, I have 57% crit and Winter's Revenge is at 43. I really don't know what's wrong with this ability. It seems kind of weird. Now Deep Fissure did more damage than previously. And you can see the max hit of this ability is high. 26k is a lot. It's your strongest ability. Then we have the Fetcher Infection, 2800. Blockade of Fire, 3k. So it's kind of a mix. Cliff Racer, because I can't activate it all the time, because sometimes I have to heavy attack. It does decent amount of damage, but it's just not as good. So next thing we will do is, let me just use the bear instead of the Death ulti to show you what kind of damage you can get with the bear. Now the bear itself, you see, targets on the 25% health take 10% additional damage, which is nice. And the abilities hit quite hard here. So, like, you see, 19k Magicka. I'm not sure when we use a spell pot, yeah, it gets stronger. I think it's actually the only pet that scales with, like... Usually pets don't scale with potions, so... The bear can get Major Sorcery, actually. Increases your spell damage by 20%. Now, I just hope they don't do the same for the Magicka Sorc pets, because that would be kinda ridiculous. But yeah, this dude can take buffs. I mean, I'm not sure if he can take buffs, but when you get Major Sorcery, he also gets it. So we will use the same setup. Just instead of the Death ulti, we use the bear. And now you have to know we have less. Oh, the bear is already summoned, yeah. So we only have 48k max Magicka now. To previously, with the Sleet Storm ultimate and all that stuff, 511, we had 54k. So we lost a lot of Magicka. Now you see we get more DPS because the bear overall does really nice damage. Like you see 2.4k, another 1.4k, another 1k. But like I said, like is it viable in a trial on a pure single target fight? Yes. But on everything else where you have ads, no, it's not good. You need to test your ulti. Now, again, like, our stats are kinda okay-ish, like maybe you want a little bit health, but you see like 2 light pieces here and 1 reduced Magicka cost together with Drain. Magicka Poison helped a lot with Sustain already. Now, like my buddy said, what he uses a Moon Dancer stuff here and a Moon Dancer piece. So you would even gain more Magicka recovery because of the Moon Dancer proc here. While you activate the synergy, you gain a Shadow Blessing that increases your spell damage by 450. And Magicka recovery by 450. So with this kind of build here, you can, I think, sustain. And we have a shock stuff on the front bar, so if we have to do heavy attacks, we can do. Now if the Warden kinda has a lot of AoE damage, so he will be really good in trash fights if you use the Destro ulti and not the bear, but we'll keep him for now. And you see it's still like, without Destro ulti like 23k. No, with the Destro ulti we had 23k, with the bear 27k. So it's like the bear gives you a lot of damage, but like I said, you will not be using it in a trial. Unless you want your raid leader to rage at you. Maybe. Again, 46%, although we're at 57, and everything is really high. It's just this. Like, it seems something's off here. And now, because we have less max Magicka, less spell damage, our abilities hit less, right? But this build here, I kinda like it. Just not use the bear. I mean, for a target skeleton, sure, if you want more damage, use the bear. So what else could we do to get more sustain? Like, let's try to not do any heavy attack at all. Let's try to use the Witch Mother's Brew on top of that. Now you see our health is low, so we will have to adjust it again to get it to a good base for trials. You see, I have to invest a lot of points now. And every time I do so, I lose Magicka. So we went from 54 to 44, basically. Now we have a lot of Magicka recovery, a reduced cost glyph, and 7 light with Drain Poison. So it might be a little bit overkill. Let's see. in terms of damage, basically no change whatsoever, because we don't have to do heavy attacks, which kills our rotation. But we still kind of lose Magicka, but in a raid you do 1-2 heavy attacks in a fight and you should be fine. I mean, I didn't have to do any heavy attack and the fight was 2 minutes long. Now again, really low crit to our, like, we will get a little bit more deeps. But you can kind of see 44k Magicka, 2.25k spell damage. Do we see Magicka recovery here? Not really, eh? Well, base regeneration is now a lot higher than usual. So with this kind of setup, I think you could do well in a trial. But like I say, like, what point is it? Like, why would I choose a class that does 25k? Well, actually, it's not even 25k. Let's see what we get when we use the Death ulti. Like, why would I choose this class over a Magicka Sword, which basically does double the damage, has almost 19k health, and has a 25k shield? Like, why would I play any other class? So I really think they have to amp up the damage on Magicka Warden a little bit. Now I do know it's not that easy to do, because you cannot buff this or this, because it's already too strong in PvP kinda. So they kinda have to look at the dots. But this is dangerous to buff because max Magicka builds, like if they give this 10 to 15% more damage, if you have max Magicka builds, they will do a ton of more damage. They probably have to buff the infection a little bit, because it's just... We will try later too, we will just not use this skill. So I will kinda show you a rotation that I made, which is kinda weird, but... you will see in a second. First, let's try again the same thing, but with the Death ulti. And yeah, their main problem is, how do you buff the class for PvE, but not over buff it for PvP? Because the Warden has a lot of burst potential, so it's kind of a tricky subject. But I mean, they crunch the numbers, so I'm sure they know what they're doing. Okay, let's see. What do we get here? So you see it's slightly, like the difference is not that huge, but in a trial fight, Desert Ulti will just deal a ton more damage than other things. And another thing, like, that I just want to, again, the crit really low, like this, there's something weird going on. Maybe it's the combat metrics that's bugged, but I don't think so. Another thing I want to touch on is they kind of say, yeah, this is a Frost class, but the only Frost ability we have is this here. There is nothing else. It's like, it's our only Frost ability. Sure, there is some other abilities with Frost damage, but it doesn't do any damage. So it's really your only Frost ability. I mean, you have a passive that increases Frost damage, right? Where is it? This here. Increase your physical and Frost damage by 6%. But you only have one Frost ability. Like, why do you only have one Frost ability? What are the it's magic damage, huh? Yeah, magic, okay. You see, we kind of lose a little bit of damage, but we have Desert Ulti. And, yeah. A little bit more max Magicka, because this gives us 8%. Change things around a little bit. Again, we have 7 light. We still use a cost reduction to spell damage. Now fire is on my front bar. I swapped the poison to the back bar, because now we have the blockade of fire on the front bar. And we will only swap to the back bar every 20 seconds. That's about it. Now you can see it's completely, like, it's just not well balanced. Like, what did I do? First off, I basically did the same damage, but I removed the Fetcher's infection. I only apply this every 20 seconds, and all I do is I keep this up, I spam this and this. Like, I should not get the same DPS when I remove dots. Like, why do I basically lose DPS by not having the dots? It doesn't make any sense. Like, so you don't even need this. You do the same DPS as long as you can stay on the target, no problemo. It just shows how weak the dot is. Same with this here. Like, I only apply it every 20 seconds instead of every 10 seconds. Doesn't matter. Because as long as I can spam this and keep up the blockade of fire, I'm all good. See, now just like Deep Fissure and Cliff Razor did more damage. Light detected also a lot. And what I did is I used this, I used this twice, I used this twice, I used this, and I just reapply the blockade of fire when it goes down. And every 20 seconds I activate this here, weapon swap, reapply my dot. Don't forget to deep fissure again, and then mental drain and swap back. It's just like the class is not very well balanced yet in terms of Magicka. Stamina is a little bit other. So I kind of hope this shows you what direction we can go in. Like, I could do the same. I could do another Parse. Like, you could get more DPS, but you will end up with like 14k health. Like, because I have 19 attributes in health. Like, you could get a little bit higher, but then the build is not really viable for trials. This kind of setup, yeah, I like it, but I would love to apply all the dots and that stuff, because this setup, it's not really good for the game. The rotation is fast-paced, but I really hope they buff some of the ability. Not those, like those here are already strong, and if they buff those, they will destroy people in PvP. They probably already do. They need to buff dots, a little bit this and a little bit infection, and then I don't know, dude. I don't know. Need to get to 35k DPS somehow. I just don't know how yet, but maybe we'll figure it out at some point. So I hope this kind of gives you a first impression of Magicka Warden DD. I will do the same for Stamina Warden as soon as possible to kind of showcase you what you should looking at in terms of DPS. What do you think about this, like, certain setup, or do you have other ideas? Obviously here, like with 5 pieces Moon Dancer, I can't really try because I don't have synergies. But when we don't use a full monster set, we lose again damage, so it's like, there's nothing left, okay? Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Cheers.